Thanks for tuning in tonight to Watch Girls A to Z. Merry Christmas, happy almost New Year. We are very excited to have you tonight. For those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm Alaina, and this is my guest tonight, Armand Johnson. We have a very interesting show ahead of us, and looking forward to hanging out with all of you guys. Before we get started, Armand, give yourself a little introduction. Tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, my name's Armand. I work the same department with Alaina, actually. I've been with the company for a few years now, specialize in buying, selling, and trading new and pre-owned pieces. Yeah, that's about it.
Don't sell yourself short. This is one of our best sales guys. If you guys have any interest in buying, selling, trading, like he said, give him a call. You can always reach him on one of our numbers, and he is very well versed and knows a lot about watches.
You're too kind.
Very excited to have you here tonight.
Excited to be here.
As most of you will notice, this is not Zoe. Since we pre-recorded our last show, we didn't have a chance to tell you guys some pretty exciting news, which is that Zoe is making a huge move across the ocean. She is going to be relocating to Hong Kong for a couple months to see, you know, what the watch world's like there. The good news is Watch Girls A to Z is not going to be over. We are going to do our best to embrace technology and stream from both sides of the pond. So looking forward to it, excited to have her back. If you guys follow her on Instagram, definitely send her some good wishes. I'm sure she would appreciate it. You know, big move, exciting, but could definitely use some love, I'm sure. So Zoe, excited for you. Good luck taking off tomorrow morning, and we can't wait to catch up. Awesome. So before we get started tonight, as usual, let's talk about what we're wearing tonight, and I will let you go first as our guest.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm wearing, this is my 36mm Datejust. It's a 16030, and it's got kind of a special dial.
The dial's amazing.
Yeah, we have this sort of gold fleck pattern, as some people call it. It's also known as a moss dial. And, you know, I wear it everywhere. I swim with it. I legitimately do everything with it. Where'd
you get the watch?
I got it from Gothberg Jewelers.
Okay, and why this piece?
You know, this is my, well, first and only Rolex, but I looked at it in our case for a while, and I couldn't stop looking at it to the point where I actually would go to bed at night thinking about it. And you know, I talked to the higher ups, and I was lucky enough to get it.
It's a really, really cool piece. I'm sure Zoe would love that, since vintage Rolex is her thing. Today I decided to wear a little something for the holiday. Wearing a Vacheron Ladies Overseas, beautiful piece, thin diamond bezel, excuse me, which I happen to think is just really well suited for this model. I love the color of the strap, kind of just like the ultimate and classy, you know, beautiful watches. I wish I really owned this. It is not something I own, but maybe one day, because it's a really pretty piece. Automatic, which is also really nice, and again, not something we see uber often.
Looks great with your outfit too.
Thank you. I figured, you know, it's really cold here in Philly. I'm sure, you know, we have tons of people tuning in. I saw somebody's here from South America.
I'm jealous of that weather.
We got some people from Scotland. I bet it's also very cold in Scotland at this point of the year. It is freezing in Philadelphia. They say it's 21, but I feel like it's like
definitely in the teens.
2 degrees out. It's
wind chill factor
of
brutal. Nothing.
And again, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in today. Again, we're pretty excited. So with 2017 wrapping up, you know, this weekend we will roll into 2018. We thought it would be fun to talk about the watches we loved from this year, some Basel and SIH releases, some things that really, you know, stood out to us and have been good sellers, and just things we like. So we'll roll through them. We'll see it. We would love to hear your comments, see which watches you guys liked, which watches you didn't like from this year, and we'll get ready for 2018. So let's start. Armand, what's your first pick?
My first pick is the Grand Seiko SBGJ227, otherwise known as the Peacock. This is the third iteration of a high-beat GMT that Grand Seiko's released on a bracelet in a limited edition. The first two were the maroon dial, the SBGJ 021, and the forest green 005, which both of which are killer pieces, and they do really well if you're lucky enough to have one. I'm personally jealous. The dial on the Peacock is aptly nicknamed because I think it absolutely resembles peacock's feathers at what do they call that? A full
spread.
A full spread, yeah. I was lucky enough to see this piece in person once so far, and I hope to do so again.
Yeah, I've never seen the piece in person, but we were taking a look at it a little earlier today, and the color of the dial is pretty unique. It's not like the traditional green that you see with a lot of brands. A couple weeks ago I talked about a Panerai, and they have like a pretty hunter green. This is kind of somewhere in between, like almost like a turquoise. And those little bits of like the goldish yellow pop, I think, are really pretty neat. And Seiko's, Grand Seiko's a really innovative, really cool brand. Huge following. I have a couple customers. I have a customer in Puerto Rico who's a big collector. He must have, 4 or 5 and is always shooting over messages with the newest, greatest thing. So I think it was a hit this year. I hope I get to see it in person.
Yeah, it's knockout.
Yeah, so in kind of the same realm of watches, a little bit sporty, I don't think you could talk about 2017 without talking about Omega. It was a big anniversary year for them, and they released a lot of really nice pieces at Basel this year. For me, I'm traditional with the Speedmaster. The Speedmaster 60th anniversary watch I really like. It was a pretty cool piece because they paid attention to the previous model and almost replicated it exactly. So the proportions of the watch, the style of the lugs, the color of the lume, the way that the tachymeter is written, all of it was so highly considered that it came out with almost like this little perfect Speedmaster, in my opinion. We've done really well with them, and I think for collectors, this is kind of the ultimate in the Omega Speedmaster collection.
It really is the perfect reissue because it's like a carbon copy of the original, like you were saying. The size is one thing that really gets to me because I like watches that aren't so big, as you can tell with my 36 millimeter. And I believe this is a 39 millimeter case, and it wears just a little smaller than that. And just little hints of detail, like the Omega symbol on the clasp is very similar to the original as well. The original also had the polished links, which I think is a nice touch just to kind of dress up a bracelet watch slightly.
Yeah, not every brand does a reissue particularly well, but I think this was a great one. And again, we've seen a lot of attention towards it. And I think for the people that do collect Speedmasters, and there's a lot of people out there, this is a must-have in your collection.
And I think the other two, the Railmaster and the Seamaster that came out, were also just as good recreations of the originals. So they should definitely be mentioned.
Yeah, no, all of them are really nice pieces, and we have seen them come through. Nice sizes, nice, solid build, everything you would expect from Omega. And again, I think for collectors, it was a really good release and an exciting year.
I think this piece too, it kind of brings back the fact that watches don't have to be huge, and there are some big watches that I like, but something that's, for lack of a better word, trending as much as this watch. It's kind of cool to see that a vintage throwback of a normal size can really take off. Yeah,
and I wonder, I don't know that much about the era and time from the original of this watch, but I imagine that at that time, it was sort of a bigger watch, which is kind of cool as well. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit higher up on the scale. Let's talk about Patek.
Absolutely. This year, Patek released the 5320G, and this is their newest perpetual, and it's a new caliber base for them. I believe it's a caliber 324 SQ, which I know I got that wrong, but it's fantastic. The layout couldn't be cleaner for a perpetual, from the day and month digital indicators to the leap year indicator to the AM/PM indicator, the moon phase, and the classic analog date setup. I just think the watch couldn't be cleaner. I'm a big sucker for syringe hands like that. It's just akin to another time, and I don't think they could have done a better job with it.
So I had the watch in my hand for the first time last week, and it's a really interesting watch. I wouldn't say it's traditional for Patek. It almost has a more cartoon is probably not the best word, but it almost has like a cartoon feel to it when you look at the way that the numerals are applied. And there's something about the color of the dial as well that just, I don't know, it feels a little different than Patek, and I like that that's what they did this year. You know, they didn't, they stayed traditional, they stayed true to themselves, but they popped it up a little bit and made things a little bit more interesting.
They definitely did. I see what you're saying about the numerals, and when you see it in person, it's really like, they're really off the dial. There's really
it's three-dimensional.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's really three-dimensional.
Much more so than many of their other pieces, which is interesting. I did take a long look at it when I had it in my hands last week, and it's just something different. And I guess it is. It's the three-dimensional numerals are right on that. And
it is this layout was originally used, and I have this written down, the 1526, which was one of their first serialized perpetuals. So I think anything that throws back to a first is really cool. And I think they went above and beyond with the case as well, just because it's got such a deco look to it.
Those lugs are beautiful on it.
Outrageous.
It's interesting. It feels like a lot, and I think we've talked about this on some other shows, but it feels like a lot of the 2017 releases were, you know, homage to something in the past and reissuing some things and playing around with kind of vintage styles. But I think this is cool because I do think it still has kind of a contemporary feel about it. I don't know, again, if it's just because Patek hasn't done that many things that look like that, or I don't know, maybe just the combination of the design. But it is interesting. We've seen a lot of people who have done that. Let's see what kind of comments we got going on here on this piece.
Let's see. A lot of talk about the Speedmaster.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend, if you can get a chance, definitely see one in person.
It's interesting. Robert Dixon, excuse me. He is commenting on the Omega value dropping due to oversaturation. This is an interesting topic, and I'm actually kind of happy that you brought it up because Omega is a brand that I think sometimes does it so well. They do some really cool limited editions, and they hold them tight, and they really release them as limited editions, and the value on those skyrockets. You think about, for example, the Snoopy. The Snoopy, I mean, is still going crazy high and hugely collectible. And then they release some Planet Oceans, and they produce a lot of them, which does bring down the value a little bit.
But it's nice because Omega, along with quite a few other brands, are really tightening up distribution overall, and I think it's going to help the market in general. But yeah, in regards to the Snoopy, it's not even that it's, you know, several times over retail. It's that you also can't find one.
Yeah.
They're not out there. You know, I'm sure if you were to dig deep and, you know, dig deep in your pockets as well, you could get one, but
it's such a correlation though, and you're right, just the oversaturation is what brings down the market. So if Omega continues to do some really cool limited edition pieces and holds them tight, I think that you'll see the value hold, and you'll see the value go up over time. I do think these Speedmasters and the Railmaster, I think they're going to hold their value pretty well, and I think collectors are going to be happy to have them in their collection in a few years from now.
I think so too, and even in regards to the Railmaster, the non-limited edition Railmaster with the vertically brushed dial, yeah. I think that's going to do well too. I think they did a really nice job with that.
Yeah. So.
Moving on to a more contemporary piece.
Yeah. Speaking about Pateks, Armand picked the 5320. I went with the 5960G. So this is a watch that Patek's been making for a while, but they released it in the white gold and did something pretty interesting, which is released it with the black dial on a brown strap. I think something that Patek does really interestingly is how they release models and metals. You know, there's a lot of watches in the line, but something again that they do well is, you know, they'll release it in what do they typically do first? Golds or steel?
Generally precious. Yeah.
Precious first. So it's just an interesting thought. For this piece, obviously it's white gold, but this blue dial on it is shocking. There was also a black dial one. I think I mentioned black dial before, but it's actually the blue dial I was talking about. Has an awesome nautical feel, is a really cool kind of sporty luxury watch, and I love the combination of that brown and blue, the brown strap with the black dial, the blue dial. Excuse me, I keep mixing that up. I have no idea why. I think it's for the younger collector. It's something different, and it's the same strap that you'll find on the Pilot's watches that were released previously, and again, I think it's a cool update for Patek, something a little younger and hipper.
I think so too, and the dial in general is just, it's very sporty. Like you almost forget that this is an annual calendar. You almost forget that it's a flyback. You know, to a lot of people, it may look like a standard three-hander with a date subdial and digital.
It is a crazy complication. You forget that. And
you can see the totalizers towards the 6 o'clock position. I love that they did those in white and red, just like the three-hand set in the center. It just, pieces knock out. And in person, it's
so
everything
much
in person is, it's outrageous.
I'm with you. You do. You like, the design is so great on it that I didn't even think to talk about the complication, which is a lot of bang for your buck and a pretty serious, like, hard to make complication. So I loved that watch. I'm always excited to see what Patek does. I think, again, they, make minimal changes and, can redesign a watch to be something completely different than a previous model, which is cool.
Absolutely, and like in the same reference, the 5961A, they just released with a black dial. Previously had a white dial, and the black dial, excuse me, the black dial version it's outrageous, and it's very different from this white gold blue dial, which I think it makes it special. It really does.
Yeah. And of course, you can't go on without talking Rolex.
Gotta talk Rolex. So I think a lot of people expected the Datejust 41 to be released in steel in 41 millimeters rather than two-tone, and Rolex delivered, and they did so in a fantastic way. Now, I could beat a dead horse about it, but I like 36 millimeter Datejusts. I really do. I feel like that's a size that fits my wrist. Some people think it's a little small, and I understand that. So this is for that crowd. This is a perfectly proportioned Datejust with outrageous options. You can get a smooth bezel, you can get a white gold fluted bezel, and you can now get it on a steel Jubilee bracelet, which I think is really cool as well. And any combination works well.
In a world where, the watch brands make most of the decisions when it comes to design, you can do very little customizing if you want to keep something actually, factory. Maybe a new strap, or you can swap out a bezel. I think it's just, cool that Rolex does this. You can get it in so many variations. And, for a lot of people, 36 is small. I happen to think it's a nice size as well. But it's funny when you start to think of like 41 as a big watch, which we do in the Rolex world, but it's really not even that big of a watch. So for some people, it is the right fit.
And it wears nicely. The way that they redesigned it from the Datejust 2, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
The way that they redesigned it from the Datejust 2, I think everything that they needed to fix, not that the Datejust 2 is flawed, it's just a different watch. Everything that, for me personally, I thought they needed to fix, they did. And they slimmed it out a little bit. They changed the proportions of the bezel. They hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I like that piece too. For my choice, I picked the Steel Sky Dweller. This was kind of a controversial piece. Much like Patek, Rolex is messing around with introducing different watches in different metals. What I think was an interesting move was to introduce, obviously, the gold and then this steel. We had a couple upset customers that had just spent all this money on the gold version, and then the steel comes out. But, in reality, they're two different watches. They do have some design differences that they've done this year, much like they did with the Datejust. I happen to really like the white dial version of it. I think we have the blue up on the screen, which seems to be the bigger seller this year, but blue dials are really in. I really like the white dial, and it's the most complicated watch that Rolex makes. So to make it in steel is kind of just like a cool juxtaposition. You get a complicated watch in a steel metal, which I think is pretty cool. Again,
another piece that you wouldn't think of the complication. Again, an annual calendar. For those of you that don't know how the Sky Dweller works, you'll see the little indicators on the end of the hour markers. That indicates what month it is. And of course, you have the date wheel, and it's also a dual time zone piece. So adding all those complications into a fully water-resistant watch that you can actually use and actually do daily wear with, or rather, yeah, wear daily.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I think, I think they did a great job.
And hugely innovative for a generally pretty traditional brand. you know, it's a cool complication. They also did a Cellini with a moon phase, which I think is a very pretty watch. The Cellini's not always the best seller, but I happen to think that watch is a knockout.
I agree. I think that's a cool watch because when you see that, again, talking about in person, it's really important to see stuff in person.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you see it in person, the meteorite on the moon it's crazy. It really is outrageous. And the way that it seems to float above the blue subdial for the moon phase it's amazing.
I feel like one of these days Cellini's going to make a comeback. You know, Rolex is pushing it. They're
I
putting
think they're
a little
well on their way.
attention into it. I think we're going to see a comeback on the Cellini line.
And again, they're making it water resistant to 100 meters, and it's with a screw down crown for a dress watch. And granted, you know, you're not going to go swimming with your alligator strap, but
some people may.
Some people may.
You know, people put them on rubbers. I don't know. That watch would look horrible on a rubber, but to each their own. Everybody can do a little bit what they want. All right, and so your last pick,
yes.
2017. It's got to be a good one.
It is. It's a great one. This is the limited edition FP Journe Holland and Holland piece. Geez, I mean, whenever I talk about Journe, I get kind of giddy, and you can probably attest to this. It's just everything I want in a brand, Journe has. It's kind of like the man himself. He's outrageous. He's very set in his ways. He likes to follow the wake of watchmaking, and I think it's just so. For lack of a better word, inspirational. His techniques are incredible, and this watch is actually really special. It's a 66-piece limited edition, where the dials are actually made from Holland and Holland firearm barrels that were repurposed. 28 came from one barrel and 38 came from another. So that's what kind of sets the number of the limited edition in this case. It's also Journe's first, and I believe only. I guess it would be his only if it's his first time-only movement, which is cool in itself. You know, it's a traditional dress watch. And his first and only stainless steel 39mm case. So it's truly a limited edition. It's something different than he has ever done, and he will continue to do different things. And it couldn't be better. I could stare at it.
I feel like, you know, we had Ari on last episode, and you told the story about how he got his Journe. I think the whole thing about Journe it is a story. There's just always a story behind the watch. There's always an interesting reason why he designed it the way he did, or why he did this, why he did that. And to me, that's so appealing about the brand. There's not that many brands out there that have sort of that intimate, real story. You know, brands make stories for marketing purposes, but his story's real. Like, if you meet the man, like, this is not a joke, this is not a persona, this is like the real thing going on. He's a very interesting guy, and you know, just the master of watchmaking. It's incredible.
He's an inspiration because, for one thing, he got kicked out of a watchmaking school because he couldn't agree with certain techniques being used because he wanted to do it better, and it turns out that he did. And I couldn't like the brand more. I really couldn't.
I'm with you, and I think for most watchmakers, watch collectors, as you start to get into collecting, you realize why Journe is such a special brand. As again, we heard from Ari last week, and many other collectors and, you know, watch enthusiasts we have around us. Nobody doesn't like Journe.
It's hard not to.
I think it would be hard to find somebody that didn't love it, or at least appreciate it. It may not be your aesthetic, but I
actually have read on various forums that the reasons that certain people don't like his watches is because they don't understand his his attitude towards things, and maybe they met the guy, maybe they've been lucky enough to meet him. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's great. I really do.
Very fitting that you would. My next pick is a little bit different than the Journe. I went with a Nomos Glashütte. In particular, excuse me. By the way, I'm sick tonight. I'm coughing. I apologize a little bit about it, but the Ahoy Neomatic. So Nomos had a pretty big year this year. I think they're doing something just so smart. They're hitting the entry-level collector. And what I think is so smart about it is, you know, there's a lot of competition for the entry level, and I think a lot of those people go into smartwatches. So in one sense, you know, it's probably a scary thing, but Nomos does it so well, and they make such cool, well-designed watches that are affordable for the entry level collector. And I'm telling you, like, if somebody gets this on the wrist, they're going to get into watchmaking. Almost all of their watches have exhibition case backs. Again, beautiful design. They do some really cool straps. I picked the watch that I picked just because of the dials. It comes with a blue dial and it comes with a bright orange dial. If you see them in person, they are so vibrant and so different, and it's a great fit for most wrists, I think men, women. I just think the brand did something great. The club campus pieces that I was talking about are really cool as well, and all the blogs hit them. But I don't know, there was something about the dials on these other pieces that I don't know, I love them.
It is very different, and I feel like we have actually hit a lot of dial colors tonight, which is sometimes hard to do. And you know,
blue trended.
Yeah, blue apps, but not this blue.
This is totally different.
It's very different, and it's so cool, and it's got a fun nautical feel to it. And again, this is a watch that you would never expect, but you can swim with it. You know, it's 200-meter water resistant with the crown screwed down, and it's something that's easy to wear and will get people into watches. You know, it's an easy first mechanical watch for somebody in terms of entry point.
Yeah, also a great conversation piece. Like if I saw somebody wearing that, even not as somebody that knew watches, I would probably ask them about that watch. Again, it's like got that uber cool German design to it, and the dial pops. The orange one is really cool too, and I think it's a conversation starter, which for many collectors is how you become a collector. You know, if nobody wants to talk to you about your watch, it's really not that fun to have it.
It's funny too, because I feel like, you know, there's a big push in Swiss when there's a lot going on in Germany, and if you're in the know, you know that there's a lot going on in Germany. You have your Lange, you have your Glashütte Original, you have Nomos for the big three, and for such a small town, Glashütte, I think, has like 6,000 or 7,000 people, and they're probably mostly watchmakers, or they're probably mostly marketing for a watch company. And for instance, the Glashütte factory, the Nomos factory, and the Lange factory are all like right across the street from each other, almost literally. And they're all kind of shoehorned into this small town. It's really cool the way that German watchmaking kind of came about and got popular.
Yeah, it would be interesting to, you know, do a little research or talk to some people to see how the three brands, if they are so closely located, interact. Because actually looking at some of these pieces, you can kind of see some, like, you know, similar styles and aesthetics and decisions that they made. And I don't know if that's just part of the German way, or if, you know, they're switching watchmakers, because apparently it's very competitive out there in the watchmaking world, and, you know, brands take other brands' watchmakers. And so I wonder if you see a little bit of, you know, similarities in design, because they're so closely located. And, you know, although there is a lot going on in Germany, I think obviously, like, Switzerland's overblown with the amount of watchmaking, so it may be a little bit more intimate and a more collaborative environment, which is pretty cool.
There is actually a reason that the Glashütte and Lange dials look similar, and man, I wish I could, because it would be really impressive.
Where's Tim?
I know Tim would know. I know Tim would know. Oh, I want to say it had something to do with some war, but I could be wrong. But it's interesting with those dials too, and I hate to harp on this, but if you actually draw the lines, you know, you see a lot of off-center dials. If you actually draw the lines, it feels more symmetrical when you draw it. And I don't know what this hand motion was, but it feels more symmetrical, and it's really cool when you see where the design lines were drawn in that.
We'll have to grab Tim. He's actually not in today, but we will find out. We're going to find out why those dials all look kind of similar, and we will get back to you on that.
Somebody made a really good point in the comments, actually. Marco, 4,000 for in-house movements and great quality, and that's a really good point, because Nomos is getting into in-house movements, and not only in-house movements, but thin ones. I don't want to say it's easy. It's not easy to make an in-house movement, but it's even more difficult to make it refined to the point where it's thin.
Absolutely. Again, most people could probably create an in-house movement, but to be able to streamline it and fit it into a certain aesthetic and a certain, you know, depth in a case, which generally all their watches are pretty thin, it's a feat. It's not that easy
and the
to
price
do.
point. The price point is a huge thing. Nomos actually ran a campaign where they had a pile of stamps. I think it was like 9 stamps next to their in-house movement, and I think the stamps stood taller. And that's kind of a cool way of illustrating just how slim it is.
Very cool. So again, tons of brands did it right this year. Tons of brands had watches we loved. We thought it'd be fun to just talk about some pieces that didn't quite hit the mark for us for whatever which reason. Armand, your first pick, an Omega.
Yeah, I'm usually a big fan of Omega. I thought, you know, it's not that I don't like this watch. It's really not. I just wish it wasn't, I don't know, platinum or maybe as expensive. I understand the limited nature of it, which, again, why not make it more special by putting it in a precious metal case? But in this case, I feel like it would be better suited in steel. You know, you don't have a lot of, or any that I can think of, enamel center dials in steel, and that could be really special.
Yeah, there's also, you know, a time and a place for a watch, and it does seem a little odd for Omega to make, you know, this kind of elaborate, complicated watch in a platinum. Like, who are you marketing this to? Who's the buyer? Like, it's a beautiful watch. I like the color combination. The applied the indexes are really pretty. But like, yeah.
They actually did something really clever with the indexes too. If you look closely at the dial, you'll see the cities around the outside of the dial, and they use the hour markers to point towards the 24-hour ring, and it makes it actually really easy to read once you...
Like an inverted...
Yeah, once you really look at it. And so like they knocked it out of the park with that in terms of the function and readability aspect. One thing, it's 43 millimeters as well. So I would love to see this in a 38 millimeter or a 41 millimeter.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a big platinum watch. You can't really argue with that.
Yeah, and again, a time and a place. It is a beautiful piece. I'm with you. Maybe steel would have been better, or you know, some other kind of material that's a little bit more attainable. And your second choice.
Oh, right. Again, I love watches. I love all brands except for two, and I won't mention them, but there are two brands that I absolutely can't stand. Tudor is not one of those brands. I love Tudor. This was an interesting thing for me because while I like two-tone watches, I like Tudor for their utilitarian nature. They're kind of, you know, I don't want to call it this, but this is how it originally was, the affordable tool watch that was not a Rolex. You know, I like it that it's, to me, it shouldn't be gold. To me, there shouldn't be gold on it. Maybe accents, like rose gold, like the original Black Bays. But another thing is the capping. It's the center links are capped gold, which I understand, keep costs down, absolutely. Get the same look, and it's much, much better than plating. One thing that I thought they did extremely right with this was brushed the links. You never see gold center links that are brushed, and gold looks really cool brushed.
Which I guess was probably an attempt to make it a little bit more casual and a more sporty type thing, but it is a little bit of a contradiction to have, you know, the gold and then to brush it down. I'm with you. I don't love it. I think they've done some really cool releases, and they've done some really cool straps in the last couple years. This just, I'm with you. It wasn't a hit for me. Definitely not a hit.
And I usually like Black Bays.
Yeah. I'm with you. I don't think it's the strongest, but excited to see what they have for the new year.
I'm excited for your choices because I actually disagree with both of these, and I'm so excited.
All right, let's battle it out a little.
All right.
All right, my first choice. I am obsessed with the Yachtmaster Everose with the Serichrome bezel. It's my grail watch. It's my dream watch. I think it's like everything. You know, it's sporty. It's trendy. It's fashion. It's, you know, utilitarian. It's everything I want in a watch. And then Rolex went and put this bezel on it. And you know, aesthetically, it is a really pretty bezel. I just don't get it. Like, the watch is so great, and then they put this on, and it's just like, it's a little wacky. I don't know who the customer is on this. I don't know. Let's hear it. You can barely contain yourself.
I really can't. You know, this. I know a lot of people said like this isn't Rolex. This is not what Rolex is about. But at the same time, it kind of is. You know, Rolex was doing Tiffany blue Stella dials, doing outlandish gem setting, and when you see their gem setting in person, it's perfect. It's flawless.
Outrageously beautiful.
And while there is a full diamond dial version of this, and it's, I mean, Josh in Hong Kong, you would love that watch.
Yes, that is a very Josh watch.
But this, I see what you mean by, you know, kind of why, but they do cool things. They put a diamond at the 12 o'clock so you can actually use the bezel. they, you know, it's maybe a little hard to find, but I think this. I think it would be cool. I would own one.
You know what? I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. To me, just, you know, Rolex is always trying to stay, you know, they're traditional. They're traditional in so many aspects. And like you said, there are a lot of gem set pieces, and I guess generally they don't get marketed to the average human. You know, it's not in all the blogs and whatnot for the Basel and SIHH releases. So it was interesting to me that they took this and they marketed it, because we saw a lot of it when it came out. I remember the day it was released, and it was a big talk in the, yeah, it was a big talk in the office, and everybody, you know, joking around about it. So I guess, again, I understand that they do these gem set pieces and pave diamond things and whatnot, and they are beautiful. They're really well crafted. I just guess I don't know why they marketed this piece the way they did, so front and center. I
equate this one to that the crazy Daytona with the leopard strap and the yellow and orange sapphires. Like, I'll reiterate, this is something that Rolex has done for a while. And while it's not like what a lot of people love about Rolex, it's what makes Rolex still a special brand, because they do whimsical things like this, and it's so flawlessly done. I mean, I know I could read through these comments and probably
term for it, whimsical.
Right? I know I could read through these comments and probably, you know, I get torn apart, but man, I stand by that watch. I really do.
Yeah, I bet there are some funny comments on that. As all of you know, I talk about it all the time. I, again, love AP.
Love AP.
You know, the Royal Oak, these two actually both in their, you know, traditional design are Grail watches, things that I hope to own very soon, one day. But I don't know, the AP frosted gold this year. I don't even know. I don't know. I don't even know where to go with it. You know, to me, part of the Royal Oak and the fascination with the Royal Oak is the finishing. To any average Joe, you don't understand how much has gone into this, and then you find out how many hours go into, you know, the bevel edges on the bracelet and finishing the bezel, and, you know, the applied numerals and all the finishing on it. So to me, in its most pure classic form, it's the best. It doesn't need anything else. It's the nicest finishing. It's so beautiful. The brush lines, the high polish. Like, I love it. And then they did this. Now, let me say, I have not held it in for a long period of time in my hand, and I have a feeling it may be something that's like wine. It gets better with time, and it's something that grows on you and something you really learn to love. But I don't know. I just think the original Royal Oak is just so perfect as is. I don't know.
I agree with you with the Royal Oak and the finishing. I think the head of the Royal Oak has 37 surfaces to finish, which is outrageous.
It's crazy.
But I think the technique in this is very impressive. It's a hammered, you know, it's a hammering technique, which the only thing that I think would be scary with this is ever scratching it.
Yeah, like what do you do once it's...
Ever scratching it.
I wonder, again, I haven't held it that long, so I don't know. I wonder if you scratch it, can you see it?
That's what I'm wondering too. I think the way that they do it, it's you know, it's a deep enough finish to where it may be a little bit harder to scratch. It may be, you know, less likely to scratch like your standard Royal Oak bracelet, which, you know, with the kind of vertical finishing on it and the polished edges. Yeah, which one little mark
and you see.
But that's part of the fun with the Royal Oak. I think as somebody who wears their watches, like truly wears them, I like things with a little wear to it. Like Brian's 5980. Brian's 5980 is my Grail watch. Is my Grail watch. Like his specifically is.
He wears it. He likes to wear his watches as well.
He wears it, and there's a huge scratch across the bezel, and it's just it couldn't look any better. And I think that's what I might be alone in that actually.
No, you know, I saw Alan the other day, another one of our colleagues, has an AP that had some scratch marks. You know, when you love watches and you wear it, that's what happens. And I think the first scratch is probably the scary one, but...
It's always the hardest. You can call that the good luck scratch, though.
Exactly. So this was really fun. I'm so glad
we never get to talk about watches in the office.
I know, we never, imagine that. We sit together every day and we never talk about watches, at least not the fun parts of watches. So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to us. Like I said, please reach out to both Zoe and myself on our social media. You can find us on Instagram. Please send Zoe some well wishes for her trip to Hong Kong. And Happy New Year to everybody. We will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being here.